Greetings everyone, my name is Etterville, and welcome to my Let's Try of the Sage 2019 prototype demo of Megaman X and Zero training missions, a 3D Megaman X fan game in development by Adam Kareem. This is a re-recording of the original Let's Try that I did live during last Sunday's stream. I'm re-recording it as I wasn't satisfied with my coverage then. Before I begin, here's a quick rundown of the controls. I'll be playing this with keyboard and mouse. So let's begin by going to the first stage with X. On the top left is my health bar, bottom right mission time and KO score. To move X around, use the WASD keys and the camera with the mouse. To fire the X Buster, just left click. If you hold it down, you can charge up and release a charge shot. In order to toggle in and out of aim mode, press left shift. In order to dash around the place, press E. As you can see here, I can dash in any direction. And when I'm not in free aim mode, I can lock onto enemies if they're close enough by middle clicking. Unfortunately, if they're moving around, I find it better to just use free aim mode. Of course, it's a bit harder to platform when free aim mode is activated. The story here is that this takes place between Megaman X3 and X4, and X and Zero going through some training simulations to prepare for the next Maverick outbreak. There's also a range restriction for the X-Buster, so I don't have infinite range like I did with Megaman Makeshift. In fact, there's a funny bug I recently discovered. If you do a dash jump and fall on the ground again, well, your dash is still active as long as you hold down E, so you always have faster movement active. Even if you lock onto enemies, it still applies. However, you get knocked out of it if you take any damage. It does make speedrunning through the stages a whole lot easier. It also makes dodging these enemies a lot easier too. And that was the first level. You get scored based on remission time, KO score, and remaining health. Remember, in this game, there are no life pickups. On to the second level. For the first stage, it's equally viable to play as X or Zero, but for this stage, I strongly advise you play through it as X. Most of the stage takes place over a bottomless pit, and there are a lot of gaps that you have to jump over. And many of the enemies are spaced farther apart. And considering Zero doesn't have access to a rapid fire buster, it's a lot more dangerous to attack the enemies. You don't want to accidentally get knocked into a pit after all. Just like with Megaman Makeshift, enemies have an activation range. And that was my bad, I got knocked into the pit.
Teleport complete, Alia. Ending transmission.
If you're close enough to another enemy while you're locked onto another enemy, once that first enemy dies, you'll automatically lock onto the next one. That attack, if it connects with me, does a lot of damage. That was the second stage. You can do this with Zero, but it's a lot more risky. For this last stage, I find it better to do with Zero, although you can perfectly do it with X. In essence, Zero is the hard mode of this game. Sadly, this game omits the wall jumping feature the X series had. Oh well, at least we have wall jumping. Instead of having access to a Buster as his primary weapon, Zero has a Z-Saber, which starts out with the basic 3-strike ground combo. He does have access to a long-range option, his Z-Buster, but he can only use it up to 2 times at max, until it recharges. It recharges gradually over time, or faster as you destroy enemies and their projectiles. Glad to see the dash bug still works with Zero. I find locking on with Zero to be a lot more useful. And that's why. Free aim mode I find to be less useful when playing as Zero. Be careful though when dashing, you don't want to accidentally dash into an enemy. And that was the final stage. Sadly, there's no boss level. I would have preferred if there was a 4th stage for this prototype demo to better showcase Zero, but this is fine. In fact, let me go to the first stage again as Zero, just so he has more time to shine. I feel this game did a pretty good job of translating the X gameplay in a 3D style. A lot better than how X7 did it, that's for sure. And compared with, for example, Megaman Makeshift, I feel the controls and physics feel a lot more smooth. And the moment-to-moment gameplay feels a lot more satisfying too. Although, as I said earlier, I feel Zero is the hard mode of the game, whereas X is the easier mode. Outside of the 3rd stage, I feel X has a much easier time. But nevertheless, both characters feel satisfying to play as. It also seems that Zero's Buster is stronger than X's Charge Shot, because it just one-shot these enemies. And we're out of here. So here's what I overall think about this game. The controls and physics feel smooth, I like the moment-to-moment gameplay, it feels very satisfying and fast-paced, and it feels a lot more faithful to the X series. This is how I would have expected the X series to be translated in 3D, not how X7 did it. And I also like how there's a trade-off between using the free aim mode and the regular lock-on. The lock-on is better for general platforming because the camera's pulled back and you don't need to aim at enemies, but it has some problems with the faster enemies like those orbs. Plus it has a shorter distance. Whereas with the free aim mode, you'll have complete control of where the projectiles will go, meaning you can compensate for the moving enemies, as well as be able to fire at them from a greater distance, which was especially handy with some of the jumping enemies and those charging laser cannons. I gotta say though, it felt more balanced when playing as X. With Zero, you almost always want to be locked on, unless you want to use the Z-Buster. I felt it was too risky to use a free aim mode with your sword swipes, although that may be just me and my inexperience talking. I just wish this demo had more content, more enemy types, and some boss battles, and a final boss battle. Oh well, I'm just thinking of some avenues this demo can be expanded from. Also, I'd like if this game had a windowed mode. This was kind of a pain to record, as OBS cannot detect the game while Windows 0 is on, so I have to disable it, but that causes its own issues while recording. Adding a windowed mode would rectify this problem. The only other suggestion I'd have to make this more faithful to the X series would be to add wall jumping, even if it's in a somewhat limited fashion, because that's one of the defining features of the X series, along with dashing. Out of the 3 Sage 2019 entries that I've sampled, I say that this one is my favorite, with Makeshift being my close second. This prototype demo is short, but it gets the point across. Frankly, I wish there were more 3D Mega Man fan games out there, or even Mega Man X fan games in general. Nevertheless, you did a good job, Adam Kareem. I'll be keeping an eye on how this fan game develops in the future. Well then, thanks for watching, and have a nice day. Toodles!